Okay. Good morning. My name is Daniel Long. I'm the moderator for today's forum entitled South China Sea Shoals, Cays, Proxy Maps and Stunts, Election Meddlers, US and Proxies, and APCO SCS China Discovery. Today is May 2, 2025. We are live right now on Facebook, in YouTube, and in Zoom. If you have any questions, please send them in the live chats of Facebook or YouTube, or send them in Zoom. Please share the live stream and also the Zoom link for those who want to participate in this forum or symposium. We have two speakers, of course, Kamentong Laurel and Cado Paglinawan, and myself, and other participants in the recent APCO Youth Exchange Program. Some of them are now joining us via Zoom. I think we can begin first with Kamentong Laurel to give an opening statement to give us the theme for today's symposium.
Yeah, good morning. Magandang umaga po sa lahat sa ating bayang Pilipinas at to our foreign allies and friends. These past 2 weeks have been very intense and significant in the Philippines and in the world. Today we're going to deal with many of the issues that have erupted from these past 2 weeks. But we will start with a lighter narrative from Daniel Long, who joined a group of around
29
young essayists who wrote on the subject of Philippine-China ties to commemorate the 50th year anniversary of the formal diplomatic relations between the People's Republic of China and the Philippines, the Republic of the Philippines, established between Mao Zedong and President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. in 1975. So this is the 50th year. It's a significant year. And in the midst of the cognitive warfare that is being waged in our country by the Western powers, particularly the United States of America, it is a very timely effort and moment to recall the history of the Philippine-China ties that have brought a lot of friendship, cooperation, that not only transpired during the past 50 years, but the past millennium, the past 1,000 years of Filipino-Chinese engagement, people-to-people relations. So we will also have Ado Paglinawan, who is focused on the maritime issues between the Philippines and China, and has been recently popularized by the TRICOM with the mention of his name and our Vice President for External Affairs, Ana Malindo Puy, by Commodore Tariela. And I think Kaado is eagerly awaiting an invitation from the TRICOM to face off with Tariela and the questions that they may have. But that does not seem to be forthcoming yet. So let's go back to Daniel Long and some of his colleagues that are now in the Zoom.
Yeah, some of them.
So we can hear their story. It is going to be a very interesting discussion. For I think most of them, if not all of them, it will be the first time they would be
in China.
They would have visited China. They visited, of course, the Rizal Monument in Jinjiang District in Fujian Province, as well as the other sites, which we hope to hear from Daniel Long and his colleagues. If you may introduce your friends from the Zoom.
Yeah. Yes, again, thank you again, Kamentong. First, I'd like to give a short recap of my personal experiences in this delegation to China. We were, of course, led by APCO, an APCO director, and also our Vice President for External Affairs, Professor Ana Malindogoy. It was a very simple but memorable cultural youth exchange. We had Chinese counterparts, Chinese students who were with us, and we exchanged our similarities in culture, shared experiences. And this year is significant because it is the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the Philippines and the People's Republic of China. However, our relationship with the Chinese go back 1,000 years. Binondo is the oldest Chinatown in the world, known as the oldest Chinatown in the world. And for this year's Spring Festival, or the Chinese New Year celebrated, more than 500,000, or almost 500,000 Filipinos participated in this year's Spring Festival or Chinese New Year Eve celebrations with a drone show and fireworks held at the Jones Bridge over at the Binondo Intramuros Friendship Bridge in held overseeing the Jones Bridge in Binondo, Manila. And this was, of course, shared by me to the Chinese counterparts, our delegates, and they were surprised to see that we had such a strong cultural relationship, and we shared in their experiences, even though we faced some challenges. It was those challenges that we faced, issues with the Pogo, issues with the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea dispute. Fortunately, they were not brought up, and I think it was cognizant in the minds of the delegates and our Chinese counterparts that these issues and these challenges do not define the totality of the relationships between our two countries. Most memorable, of course, as Kamentong mentioned, is our visit to the Rizal Monument in Jinjiang District in Fujian Province. The height of the monument was 1,861 meters, which is, of course, the year where our hero, Jose Rizal, was born. Then later on, we visited the Guangzhou Museum, and it commemorated decades of trade relations. It was the center for shipment. According to a book from Wang Dayuan, Guangzhou kept trade relations with nearly 100 countries and regions across the world. So we can see here from ancient times the advanced trading relationship of China with the rest of the world. Later, we went on a cruise in Fuzhou, a 30-minute cruise, where we got to experience to see the night sky and the nightlife of the buildings, beautiful buildings of Fuzhou, with the rest of the delegates. Then by next morning, we took a high-speed bullet train to Zhangzhou, and we visited Dongshangdao, where they commemorated this, and even Chinese President Xi Jinping commemorates this Chinese farmer who was a very important pillar in Chinese development, Gu Weichang. His story, you can read more about it. Then we participated in a China-Philippines Gen Z, my generation, youth dialogue, where Philippine and Chinese delegates exchange conversations about how they can improve friendship and people-to-people ties. That's me in the screen, and we were made aware that about the Manila sailboat trade, which is part of the route of the Spanish galleons, and even I remember that we even prepared. That's a picture. We even prepared a a performance for our Chinese friends, our Chinese counterparts, students. A performance we practiced in the hotel lobby until 12 in the morning at night. A rendition of choreographed of Pinoy Ako, which is the main theme of the popular TV show in the Philippines, Pinoy Big Brother. So we prepared a dance for our Chinese counterparts, and we performed that the next day at the closing ceremony. It was a bit, I believe this was the fourth day of the China-Philippines Youth Exchange Program. Then we also visited this vocational arts technical school where we engaged in art, when we did arts and crafts. Then we went to Huaqiao University, wherein we learned from a professor, Chinese professor, some of the similarities, word borrowing from the Philippine language and the Chinese Fujian language. There are about 381 words, Chinese loan words in Tagalog, and mainly from Hokkien. These were introduced from Hokkien, Fujian migrants, and this is in the context of centuries of cultural and economic exchange between China and the Philippines. Some of the words I'd like to share, of course, is pansit, what we say in noodle. In the Hokkien origin is piansit. Lumpia, in the Hokkien it's lumpia. Siopao, of course, siomai. Bihon, taho, and hopia. Other words, of course, non-food related items are, sushi. In Hokkien is sosi. Yeah, sushi. In ki. Singkamas. They also call it sengkwa. Of course, hikaw, earrings. Hikaw, earrings. In Hokkien, they call it hikaw as well. Then, of course, I'll never forget, there was this young lady, this young girl, who lived her young years in the Philippines and moved back to China. And she studied in Huaqiao University. She gave a really speech. She's studying, I think her major was in translation, English translation. And she told us all of the experiences that she had in the Philippines and how being an ethnically Chinese person, she was able to bring her lived experiences in the Philippines and to share them with her ancestral in her ancestral home and live those shared experiences, waking up in the morning, buying taho, going to school, taking the jeep. She misses home. She considers both the Philippines and China. She considers her time in the Philippines to be memorable, and she considers it part of her home. Then the last day we visited SM Xiamen. This is a shopping mall, Philippine shopping mall, SM. Of course, the founder, or the Henry C, was also Filipino Chinese. We went to SM Xiamen. It felt very much like home. I was surprised at how similar it was to the SM in the Philippines. We were able to go around. The layout, the style of the mall was very similar to the Philippines, the SM malls in the Philippines. Overall, it was a very enjoyable trip for us. Many of us, it was for many of them, many of the other delegates, my colleagues. It was our first time. It was their first time in China. They had a great experience, they related with the Chinese counterparts, the students, very easily. There was no barrier at all. The language was no barrier. They also spoke English, and we were able to exchange our lived experiences, our culture, some of our favorite words, slang, and we exchanged smiles. Nothing. It felt like we were not just meeting guests who welcomed us, who were hospitable to us, but they were also very. They were like friends, and many of them have become friends. So much so, in the end, when we departed to come back home to the Philippines, we did not say goodbye to one another. We said see you again, because that was not the end of our journey, and I hope that it will we have a chance to come back and see our newfound friends again. Okay, so now I'd like to see if any of my others who have joined us in the delegation in China in the Zoom right now, if you want to share some of your experiences, please raise your hands. We'll try to get to as many of you as possible.
Who are the names here that you can call on?
Okay. I'll see if any is raising hands first. Then if not, I'll try to call on some of them. Anybody raising hands? Sorry.
Just a sign. Just call on somebody.
Okay, I'll call someone. SL Deo Lavinia. If you can share us your experiences, that would be good.
Unmute.
Unmute.
Deo Lavinia.
Yeah.
Okay. Is he a shy type?
I don't
Di
think so.
naman.
Di naman.
Oh, it's SL.
Yeah. That was Hi, good morning and good morning.
Asan si where's SL? There he and that's his photo. Gandang umaga, SL.
Morning po. Yeah, the experience was the pinaka-highlight for me is the ano, interaction with the Chinese counterparts. Because the last time I went to China, I had a hard time understanding this language barrier. But this time it was really very memorable because the language barrier was not there. There were really interested learning the Philippine culture as well. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next is Jared. Is Jared around? Please unmute. Makadami recitation. Hi, Jared. Good morning. Hello. Please introduce yourself and tell us some of the experiences you had. Hello?
For the exchange program between the Philippines and China. So, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I'll start over. So, hi everyone, I'm Jared Ko. I was one of the 30 participants for the Philippines-China Youth Exchange Program. And as Daniel had said, we had several immersive opportunities to not only visit the scenic sites that Fujian has to offer, but we also had an opportunity to interact with several Chinese students we were able to exchange ideas with and clear misconceptions about each other's countries. I believe one of the most memorable experiences we had during this trip was during the end of the tour, where we had a closing ceremony, and we really had a better opportunity to bond with our Chinese counterparts. Furthermore, even as a person who traces his ancestry from Fujian, and I previously worked with a Chinese state-owned company, a lot of misconceptions about China were cleared thanks to the thorough explanation and accommodation of our Chinese counterparts. I highly applaud APCO for facilitating such an exchange, and we hope that this will be the first and second of many exchanges that can be planned, so that the Filipino youth can see China for what it is.
Okay, let's try to get to a few more. Think we can get to two, three more, right?
Can you get a look at the names?
Can I have a look at the names?
Participants,
Some of them are caught off guard, didn't expect na may recitation though.
No, it's just a
Joan
kwentuhan.
Maceda.
Kwentuhan lang tayo.
Joan Maceda.
Joan Maceda. Okay, this is from Director Ado here, wants to hear from Joan Maceda. Hello, Joan. Joan? Hi.
Unmute.
Naka-mute.
Oh,
Hello.
there you go.
Hello, good
Hi, good
morning,
morning.
everyone.
Good
Okay, so I
morning.
wasn't able to unmute very quickly because apparently there was a notification that did not allow me to unmute, but now okay. So hi everyone, good morning. It was the first international travel for me. So it was a very for me, it was a great opportunity to really clear up the misconceptions about the Chinese community and the country itself. Because, of course, when we left the Philippines, there was tension all over. And even my parents were nervous for me. But, I cleared up everything. And for me, the highlight was the same actually with Jared. It was the closing program because Jared speaks fluent Chinese. So I really wanted to understand how the Chinese people behaves because knowing Filipinos, we are very outgoing. We are so happy. We are very expressive of our feelings. And I was very interested on how the Chinese people um, acted as well or how they behave on certain events. So every time I w- so what uh, struck me the most was the professor who sang during the gala night because at first when I saw him he was very reserved. And I remember asking Jared that Jared, kung ito ba ay isang normal na gathering ng mga Chinese, sa tingin mo ba kakanta siya, magpe-perform siya para sa mga tao? And he was like, no, Chinese people are very reserved. But every time we interacted with our Chinese counterparts, every bit of the misconception that that we saw on the media was parang nasira yon. Kumbaga, yung inaakala natin ng mga censorship na hindi umaabot sa kanila na to be honest, akala ko po kasi mga close-minded po sila. Pero they are very liberated. Mas liberated pa nga po yung Chinese counterparts namin kesa sa amin. And you see, I actually thought of a sentence na parang somehow divided kami by the language, pero united kami sa mga bagay na gusto namin. You see, yung mga hobbies po namin. So, I was very happy with those experiences na we shared with our Chinese counterparts. Yun lang po.
Of course, yeah, just big shout out to Jared. He was our main translator during the whole trip because he speaks fluent Hokkien. Okay, next, I think we can have two more. May I see the list of the participants? We could call on them. Horatio. What?
Gracious iPhone.
No, I don't think so. Let's see. Kim Alfonso. Hi. Good morning. We ask you to share just a few of your experiences. Kim.
We're asking, you have to click the ask to unmute.
Yeah, I think they
Hello,
can.
good morning po.
Hi, good morning.
Morning, Kim. We see your
Good morning.
photo there. Kim Daniwar.
Yung sa gitna.
Wala.
Nawala. Disconnect. Sus.
Okay.
I think you misclick. She nawala daw. Sorry. I think there was a misclick. So, oo. Okay. For those who are watching live and is part of the delegation, please join the Zoom if you want to share your experiences. Okay.
Anybody else?
And yeah,
Alea.
Alea. Let me see. Okay, before we go back to Kim, I'd like to call on. Yeah, Kim is here. Okay.
Okay, nakabalik na.
Okay.
Ask to unmute ulit.
Hello, Kim.
Unmute.
Please unmute.
Parang hindi siya maka-unmute, ano?
I don't think she.
Hindi maka-mute.
Are you able to unmute? Nangyari dyan. Are all of the participants, all of them, they have to ask to unmute first? Yes. Ah. We have to do that for security kasi.
For security.
For security kasi.
Oh. Well, we have to move on.
Okay.
We have to move on.
We'll see later if we can get back to Kim. Next, let's try to move on first to the other participants. Let's hear from Edciel Sotelo.
Then,
Please unmute, sir.
click mo na ba yung ask to unmute? Parang ayaw.
Having technical difficulties.
Yeah, we're having a bit of a technical issue here.
Chris, yeah.
Just question nila kung nag-iintay tayo ng participants. Sir Daniel, ilan lahat ng participants?
There were 29 of us, sir.
20.
29 of us. Students, young professionals, some are working, some are still in school. Meron mga from senior high school.
Kailan ginawa? Kailan ginawa yung cultural piece, cultural exchange?
Last week Tuesday, April 22, right? April 20, if I'm not mistaken, April 22 until Saturday, April 20, April 20.
I think lumipat kayo April 21 afternoon or evening.
Yeah, evening.
2 p.m. 2 p.m.
Yeah, the delegation started formally in April 22. Then we went home at April 26 gabi.
Ano yung main objective ng pag-bisita?
To promote people-to-people ties, particularly with the young people, educational exchange and cultural exchange. Tourism is to, in the 50-year anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Philippines and China, we wanted to have more young people experience China as it is, to keep an open mind, to learn, and to because China is a geographical reality. They are our neighbor. Even before we were colonized by the Spanish, we already had unofficial relations with them in Mindanao, the Sultanate of Sulu, in the 15th century, I believe, even before the Spanish came here, already established unofficial relations with the Chinese. And the Sultan, Paduka Pahala, went there to China, and he was buried there, actually, one of the first and only Philippine royals to be buried there. And he's ordered by multi-hectare tomb to honor him. So there are many opportunities to many links between Filipinos until now and the Chinese until now, from then until now. So we want to keep that relationship alive. So when it's mainit, diba? When the government to government relations are strained, the best way to mend that is by people to people friendships and relations.
Josh, can you keep my mic on, unmute, so that we can have the discussion? Okay, and we're waiting for, I think Joshua has communicated that Edsel and Kim can now unmute at will.
Edsel and Kim, you can now unmute. It's on your end if you want to share now. Thank you.
Okay. In the meantime, while waiting for them to join us, let's review how much of the history was of Philippine-China relations, people-to-people relations, was imparted by the Chinese host. You mentioned the Sultan of Sulu. That's one of the very significant historical milestones. That was in 14 something.
15th century.
Yeah.
1470.
17.
17.
But earlier than that, I think 300, 400 years earlier was that Raja killing of the kingdom of Butuan. So 1,000 years of relations, trade, and so on. But of course, mamaya, later I will deal with this period that we have that is very challenging for our two countries' relationship. No, the cognitive warfare that the Americans are waging with the proxies that they have in the Philippines. I think this is well. I hope the TRICOM can get to see this and understand the purposes of these exchanges that we have. You know? But they try to distort it. And
I also like to make it clear that the trip was purely cultural, educational.
yearly. Every year there's a trip.
It's just purely cultural trip. There was no discussion of politics. There was no discussion of geopolitics. Nothing sensitive was brought up. It was just about friendship, cultural exchange, educational exchange. There was we didn't talk about the West Philippine Sea. We didn't talk about pogos. We didn't talk about spies or anything sensitive. We just kept it about people to people relations, and it was non-government. It was a non-government interaction.
Okay. Any other? Walang ibang nag-mute?
Kyrie Ponce. Let's try to hear if we can hear
Kyrie.
from
Kyrie.
Let's try to see if we can hear from there. Hi, Kyrie.
Hello po.
There.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning po.
Yeah, Kyrie, please share some of your experiences in this delegation.
Naka-mute ulit kasi.
Ano po, masaya po na nakaikot kami ng China and I was surprised na we were met by Chinese counterparts and it was definitely an experience na I don't think I have ever experienced before. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity because not only did I get to learn from the trip and the culture of China, but also from the Chinese student. So I know na I've made new friends that will last a lifetime kasi up until now, we're still in contact. Yun po.
Good job. Okay, I think we can have one more, then we'll move on to Kamintong and Kado to give their speeches on other subjects. Okay, we'll see if I can call on one more. Let's circle back to Kim. Is she able to unmute? Please unmute at will.
Hey, good morning.
There.
Yeah, okay, good. Morning.
Okay, good morning po. First of all, I'm so grateful to able to join with this exchange program, and I think participating in this exchange program with students from Fujian, China is one a truly enriching experience that opened our eyes to power of culture understanding and language as a bridge between people, because I think um maybe a lot madami kaming differences, but because of the language and the culture, we can get connected. And also yung one of the highlight or most memorable for me is when I had opportunity to teach them some Filipino words. And I'm so surprised because they pick up the words quickly and with most genuine enthusiasm. And it showed me how eager they were to learn not just a language but also the culture that comes within it. And yung interaction reminded me that despite of differences in nationality or background, but yeah, we share a common curiosity and willingness to connect. To connect. Yes, that's it.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, I think we can move on for now. Thank you to everyone who shared your experiences.
Any comment from our reactors, Edmund Pancha in Tuguegarao, and we don't have our test Padla from Cagayan de Oro
Yeah,
yet.
let's try to get to them a bit later. Okay.
In the meantime, Aldo, any reaction to the discussion from our young essayists?
Well, I was kind of anticipating that as soon as they see the monument of Jose Rizal in Jinjiang City, that they will be really find it so awesome that something like that could be possible. This monument, we've been here, Camento. We also visited this as tourists. And it's bigger than our Rizal Monument. And the park is considered a shrine by the Chinese. It is an 8-hectare shrine. In other words, itong Rizal Park natin, kasya sa loob nitong Jinjiang City Rizal Shrine. No? And as you can see, perhaps in the background, the whole place has a manicured landscape. Nung kami po'y pumunta dyan, merong grupo ng 200, karamihan babae, who serve as the gardeners. And they even have a depot on the side for their supplies and replenishments. So, the grass is green and trimmed. Sabi ko nga, the term I used kanina was manicured. Alagang-alaga po ng mga China ang monumento ni Rizal sa Jinjiang City. Why? Because ang ninuno po ni Rizal ay galing sa Jinjiang City sa Fujian Province.
Great-grandfather.
Ang kanyang Filipino name was Domingo Lamco. So, yan po ang isang dahon ng ating kasaysayan na kailangan malaman ng lahat ng Pilipino na mas alaga po ang inyong monumento ng inyong national hero sa China kaysa dito sa atin. Sinubukan ko po magtapon just to test these people ng isang wrapper ng peanut, no? And when I turned my back, somebody came near me, wala pa hong 1 minuto, to pick up the trash. Pero kung kayo pupunta sa Luneta, sa Rizal Park, makikita ninyo, lalo na pagka nag-uwi ang mga tao na ang daming kalat. Yan po mga kabansa, kung paano isang banyagang mga katauhan ay nagbibigay ng mas malaking importansya. Hindi dahil naging Pilipino ang kanilang lahi, kung hindi siya ay naging isang bayani para maging huwaran, hindi lamang sa Pilipino, hindi lamang sa mga Chinese, kundi sa buong mundo kung paano magmahal sa sariling bayan. Yan po ang mapipitas nating dahon sa ating kasaysayan. Marami pa po dyan. Galing din kami sa Shandong Province, sa Desu City, ewan kung tamang pronunciation ko. At doon naman, 8 hectares din po ang burial ground ni Sultan Paduka Pahala.
You visit.
The 1417, year 1417 po ay bubisita sa Beijing. Hindi na nakauwi, namatay on his way back at doon nilibing. Pinalibing po ni Emperor Yongle with Emperor honors, no? Because he was a foreign king. So binigyan siya ng paglilibing, katumbas ng paglibing ng isang emperihador sa China. At 21 to 22 generations na po dahil naiwan ang kanyang concubine doon na si Geboning at 2 anak na si Hala at si Anhulu para maging gravekeepers. At since sila ay Muslim, nagtayo din po ng mosque doon sa area. At doon makikita natin ang mga kanilang libingan. At Diyos mio, bago po kayo makapunta, dadaan kayo sa 2 arko. Ha? Bago pa man makapunta mismo doon sa 2 building na kung saan sa likod ay nakalibing si Sultan Paduka Pahala. So ganyan po, no? Ang ating shared heritage with the Chinese people.
Mag-share din ako.
Okay.
Kasi pagkakataon na ating ma-share with our young friends that joined the APCO essayists people-to-people tour with China. And I'd like to put in context nga yung ating think tank or ating research group here, Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute. Kasi the Philippines is part of Asia. And the 21st century has been called the Asian century. At yan po naman ay malino na nakikita po natin na Asia is the most successful, progressive, dynamic economic region in the world today. Far bigger than the Western economies, and far more innovative, far more progressive. But of course, there are obstacles that are being put in front or before the path to even greater Asian success and rise. You know? And I think this effort to bring people together between China and the Philippines is very important. And I look forward to also getting to know more of your colleagues from that trip, the 29 others. No? And maybe we can
28.
sponsor a gathering here in Metro Manila for all of them. And I'd like to hear their views also, and maybe ideas how do we push forward this engagement with China. But this is also important to stress that the Philippines in engaging with China is engaging not only with China but with Asia. For example, ASEAN, naiiwan tayo ng ASEAN in many things, no? Kasi ASEAN is working very closely with China. Ano? Of course, this is just a very, very brief, small blip in the history of the Philippines and China. Kasi just before, we had good relations with President Duterte, with everybody, all the countries of the world, including China, Russia, and so on, because it was an independent foreign policy. And napasok po tayo sa mga 3 taon na ngayon ng special arrangement with the United States of America, which I think has created so much problems for us. We're not anti the US, but I think there are some problems with the US today. But anyway, we'll find some opportunity to share, to go into sharing of these thoughts and perspective.
Okay.
No?
Thank you.
Anyway, back to you.
Thank you, Kamentong. As you mentioned, we will have another formal event with our friends here who join us to China. I believe this year the Philippines is hosting the ASEAN Summit in Manila, and I believe we were told many of us, or I think all of us, will be joining the ASEAN Summit to be hosted here in the Philippines later this year, I think by November. Again, thank you to all of my
But they can stay on.
I'd like to thank all of my colleagues in China for joining the Zoom call and sharing your experiences. You may stay on if you want to listen to the other discussions of Director Laurel and Director Ado on more subjects or topics na mas mainit. So, okay, I'd like to move on now to go back to Kamentong again to give his presentation on the South China Sea subjects.
Well, actually, I discussed it with Kaado Pagbinaon here to my right, and we agreed that he would be the second speaker,
Okay.
and I'll be the last. So I pass it on to Kaado.
Good morning to all of you. Welcome to the Asian Century Forum, where we have the young people who joined the Chinese visit as our first batch of for the APCU Institute. No? My topic today is entitled Why U.S. Rules-Based Tonto Laws for the South China Sea and Taiwan Won't Work. You know, I kind of struggled with this topic. But I guess, because in my personal analysis, we are undergoing now a crisis of truth in our society. And I think it's fairly safe to say today that it's no longer the present government that is determining our national policy, but the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The evidence is creeping in overt media, in open source, all right? And a case in point is one spokesman a spokesman is supposed to be speaking for a principle. And in government, that principle is President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. Not only as head of state, not only as chief executive, but as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And with more reason, when somebody in the military makes a statement, it is supposed to be measured, authorized. Now, I would like to preempt myself Because in my prepared statement, I said, I've been waiting for a disavowal, so it cannot be fake news. Well, there was indeed a disavowal. It was not fake news because it was an interview. But it was a double speak in the disavowal. The attention of the Department of Foreign Affairs has been called because our ambassador to China has been summoned by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to explain this. And since this statement was issued to mainstream media, this speaks of a policy that taken seriously would mean that we have a puppet government that is slipping out of the mouth of Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad, spokesperson for the National Task Force on West Philippine Sea. At ako'y nagtataka, wala bang participation ng Department of Foreign Affairs dito sa task force na ito? So paano magli-leak ang information na ito? Ha? Without at least admitting that this discussion is going behind closed doors between the Philippine and the US military. Ito po ang quotation. Interview po ito ha, kaya hindi pwedeng fake news. Talks are underway to regularize warship transits across the Taiwan Strait, a development that Trinidad hinted could lead to formal joint military activities between the two neighbors and thus reshape strategic calculus in the region. Ang lingwahe pong ganito ay hindi aksidenteng lumalabas sa bibig ng isang tao. Ang two neighbors pong pinag-uusapan dito ay Pilipinas at Taiwan. And definitely, it will reshape the strategic calculus in the region. Tuloy niya. In the West Philippine Sea, we must maintain presence. We must ensure that the Filipino people understand that the government is there for them, that the military is protecting what is ours. Ladies and gentlemen, when the Rear Admiral invoked the people, this is not just a military soundbite, but a political statement reserved for civilian authorities. This is not just a foreign policy whose chief architect is the president. It is a national policy reserved at the level of the Congress of the Philippines under Article 6, Section 23, Subsection 1 of the Philippine Constitution. That it is only the Congress of the Philippines that can authorize this country into going into a hot warfare. The Manila Times correctly analyzed what Trinidad was talking about. While the Philippines has historically upheld a one-China policy, its growing security ties with the United States and other like-minded partners have placed it on a delicate balancing act. The two neighbors Trinidad was referring to here is not China in the Philippines, but Taiwan and the Philippines. That is why the prospect of a Philippine-Taiwan military activities, even if limited to information sharing, patrol coordination, Yusek Teresita Dasa, huwag niyong i-disown yung patrol. Sinabi niya, patrol coordination or humanitarian staff most likely be viewed by Beijing as provocative. Tapos babawi siya. He stressed that Philippine defense efforts remain anchored in lawful. Are you kidding me? Transparent action? Are you kidding me? Kasi daw, we're not looking for a fight, we're not backing down either. What is ours is ours. You are wrong, spokesman Trinidad. Our relation with the Taiwanese is confined to economic and cultural, humanitarian, and informal issues as clarified by the DFA. That is why we have a Manila Economic Cooperation Office in Taipei. And with your rank as Rear Admiral, you might even be in the top 3 of the Philippine Navy. This is unconscionable for you not to know. You're not defending your own. You're not protecting but putting the Filipino people in clear and present danger of not only harm and devastation. Your disclosure is not just provocative. You have just declared war on the People's Republic of China. You have even revealed the context of the plan that is underway and your actions. Pakinggan yung mabuti ito, mga kabansa. From the mouth of this Rear Admiral. There is now more coordination, more collaboration, and more communication among partners. Meaning the Philippines, the US, and the allies of the US. That is a very important message to everyone who challenges. Note the term that he used. Rules-based international order. You have even become a parrot for rules-based order. I am sure your spies are monitoring this forum, so listen carefully and listen well and be educated. This cannot be a balancing act. We cannot be balancing our relationship with the China over Taiwan, you idiot. It is a gross violation of the Constitution, renouncing war as an instrument of national policy. It is an outright violation of our One China Treaty with the People's Republic of China. The fact that you are dealing with another entity on matters of security at the expense of the contracted party that we have diplomatic relations with is in violation even of international convention. This, if your superiors have ordered you to engage with, is an illegal order. In the same modus as the extrajudicial rendition of a former president was executed by this same administration, this cannot be the handiwork of Filipinos, but an alien state that is now running our country. Hence, we have a crisis of truth. Let us go into specifics. Kung ano ang mga ramification ng idiocy mo, Trinidad. Over the weekend, past weekend, Philippine security forces completed a joint operation to assert the country's authority over several small islands near Pag-asa as China stepped up its activities in the area by seizing the nearby Sandy Cay. Please note that in 2019, the late Ambassador Chito Santa Romana said that the Philippines and China have reached a consensus for both parties not to occupy the feature. So ano sumunod? The usual familiar verbosity and braggadocio accompanying the usual action of the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea. To wit, the operation showed the unwavering dedication, commitment of the Philippine government to uphold its sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea. I will repeat, sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea. The press release added, it reinforces the Philippines' adherence to the rule-based international order and its commitment to the peaceful resolution of disputes. It is the National Task Force of the West Philippine Sea that is using this rule-based international order. But before we get swept under our feet, let's go back to the basics. Kung ano ang nangyayari dyan sa Pag-asa. Alright. According to the 2016 arbitral ruling that the Philippine Maritime Shoals Act adopted as part of the law, Pag-asa is not an island but a rock. The arbitration merely classified the feature, but it did not, as it cannot award the feature as belonging to Philippine sovereignty. Ano po ang diferensya? Iraq can only generate its own 12 nautical mile territorial waters, but is not capable, as an island is capable of generating its own exclusive economic zone. Admittedly, we have, however, the de facto occupation of the rock since 2002 Declaration of Conduct. Kasi po noon, nagkigera na, lalo na China at saka Vietnam. So, ASEAN went into an adoption of a declaration na status quo muna. Kung saan kayo nandyan, pirmis muna, walang kikilos. Alright. So the 2002 Declaration of Conduct declared the status quo among the claimants. Our presence in Pag-asa is our enforcement of Presidential Decree 1596 as one of the islands being claimed by the Philippines that was erstwhile part of the Kalayaan Island Group. Ngayon, eto na po ang mga komplikasyones. Kung magsalita kayo kasi, para kayo laging nagmamadali papunta sa comfort room. Hold your breath. Meron pong maraming komplikasyon. Nagsimula ako sa 3, napunta ako sa 9. First, it is also claimed by China, Vietnam, and Taiwan. Hence, the existence of a dispute. Even our occupation of Pag-asa is disputed by 3 parties. So, hindi pa po tayo printed dyan. Second, what presents as another complication is under paragraph 574 of the arbitral ruling, the claim of the Kalayaan Island Group as an archipelago has been invalidated by the arbitral tribunal. Hindi pwede po tayong magpasok ng archipelago dyan. So pati po yung Presidential Decree 1596, kumakalog na ang tuhod. Ito pa isa. Pangatlo, yung 3 features that we are claiming under PD 1596 namely Pag-asa, Parola, and Kota, have fallen outside of our 200 nautical mile claim for exclusive economic zone from our western coastlines under the Philippine Maritime Law. Nasa labas na po ng ating claim. At yung claim na yun, disputed pa rin. So huwag kayong masyadong nagmamadali. Ang Pilipino po ay hindi mangma. Kayo ang bobo. Fourth, kung yan ay nasa labas, mga kabansa, kung yan ay nasa labas, noong kiniklaim natin 200 nautical miles, mga kabansa, nangangahulugan lamang na walang sovereign rights that are in effect there. Nasa labas na nag-iisa eh. At bilang nasa labas ng EEC, fourth, there are no sovereign rights issued Pag-asa, as there is no Kalayaan Island Group, as it is outside our claimed EEZ. Panlima, assuming sovereign rights in our EEZ does not give us entitlement over the waters because UNCLOS classify it as high seas. International waters na po yan. Yung ating sovereign rights is only under the water. Yung pong ibabaw, high seas na po yun. 6, eto na, yung sinasabi ko kaninang Declaration of Conduct, Section 5. The parties undertake to refrain from action of inhabiting on the presently uninhabited islands, reefs, shoals, cays, and other features to handle their differences in a constructive manner. Papakita ko sa inyo mamaya kung paano nag-observe ang China niya. 7. So, eto, galing sa Philippine News Agency, statement ng Philippine Communications Office. Mga kabansa, Philippine flag raised on Sunday Cay to assert sovereign rights. Wala po tayong sovereign rights over land features. Ang sovereign rights ay under the water lamang. So, ultimo itong nasa government media, isang damakmak na mga bobo. 7. What is our basis for claiming Sandy Cay? The Chinese have long claimed Sandy Cay before the Declaration of Conduct. The feature together with Subi Reef, where they have already built an artificial island. Bakit nung panahon ni Presidente Marcos Sr., hindi niya sinama ang Sandy Cay? Simple lang ho explanation. Yung pong mga pictures na yan were all underwater until 2017. At yan po, claim na ng China together with Subi Reef where they have already built an artificial island. In deference to the Declaration of Conduct, however, China exercises effective control of the rock but does not inhabit it. That is why the Chinese Coast Guard drives away fishermen and excursionists who use the Cay as a rest stop. 8. Dito lang 2017, 15 years after the DOC, when the case manifested as a rock primarily because the movement of the sands came from Subi Reef to make it finally a high tide elevation entitled to its own 12 nautical miles. Nine, the 12 nautical mile territorial sea of Pag-asa does not overlap or engulf Sandy Cay, in contradiction to news reports that are saying that. Alam niyo ba mga kabansa kung paano nila kinikidnap ang Sandy Cay? Ang tawag nila sa Sandy Cay ngayon, mga kabansa, itong mga manglulokong mga Pilipino ay Pag-asa Cays. Wala nang Sandy Cay sa kanila. Ginawa na nilang Pag-asa Cays. At yung described principle of using the median line for delimiting territorial seas between Sandy Cay and Pag-asa with opposite or adjacent coast is articulated in Article 15 of the 1982 UNCLOS. This article states that, and this illustration will show it, that in the absence of the agreement to the contrary, the boundary is the median line, every point of which is equidistant from the nearest point from the baselines from which the territorial sea of each state is measured. Joshua, pakita natin yung drawing. Yan. If the total distance is 3 to 4 nautical miles, according to Speaker Martin Romualdez na nakikisaw-saw dito, ay nako, alagaan mo muna yung pwesto mo dahil kinukurot-kurot ka na ng pinsan mong si Tiangco. Baka mawala pa yan sa'yo. Huwag ka na makialam dito. If the total distance is 3, or for that matter, 4 nautical miles, the territorial sea where Pag-asa, as a rock, faces Sandy Cay as another rock, is only as good as 1.5 nautical miles and vice versa. Ayan po mga kabansa. Let us summarize. Pag-asa is not an island but a rock. It is claimed by the Philippines under PD 196, but the arbitral award invalidated Kalayaan Island Group. So ano na nangyari dyan sa PD 1596 na yan? Hanggang sa atin na lang yan, kwentuhan na lang tayo. Wala hong epekto yan sa labas ng Pilipinas. At itong Pag-asa ay nasa labas na ng kine-claim natin na 200 nautical mile EEC. So hindi na rin sakop yan ng sovereign rights, if ever. On the other hand, the Sandy Cays have become rocks. High tide elevation due to sand shifting from Subi Reef, which is occupied by China. China claimed the features ahead of the 2002 Declaration of Conduct. Paano ngayon niya? If the Philippines does not agree to this, it will be subject to the President's setting ruling of the International Court of Justice, Qatar versus Bahrain, March 16, 2001, which ruled an exception to wit. Lalo pa tayong malilintikan sa katigasan ng ulo natin. Ito po ang paragraph 175. The above provision does not apply, however, when it is necessary by reason of historic title. Patay. Which might prejudice our position regarding Pag-asa. Ano ang problema ko that China claimed the features ahead of the 2000 Declaration of Conduct? Yung pong historic rights for the entirety of the South China Seas that has been a subject of a treaty, hindi na ako palalawak pa, of 1972 after ma-recognize ng United Nations ang People's Republic of China nagpirmahan ng treaty in 1972 ang Japan at People's Republic of China. Turning over all the territories they have occupied during World War II. Sa US ba tinurnover? Hindi. Sa China. Sa Pilipinas ba tinurnover? Hindi. Sa China. So what maritime jurisdiction do we have in the area except for the 12 nautical miles entitlement after the limitation of Pag-asa as a rock that we are occupying? Sundot tayo na sundot sa puwitan ng dragon, baka mamaya pati sa Pag-asa mapalayas pa tayo. Yan ang sinasabi ko. Simple lang naman na hinihingi ng China eh. Alalaman natin mamaya. Pero punta tayo rito kay the Tontolo. The posturings of Senator Francis Tolentino that China's action is an outrageous assault on Philippine sovereignty is uselessly provocative and can be likened to a mad dog floating in his mouth. Asong ulul. His rejoinder, this brazen intrusion, must be met by the strongest diplomatic and defensive measures. This statement reveals another chronic Philippine modus. Violate muna tayo and then call in the diplomats. The rookie senator, thank God there is no indication he will be re-elected, is the principal author of the Philippine Maritime Zones that in just a month has been causing escalation in the tension in the South China Sea instead of preventing or solving it. The interagency maritime operation by our Navy, Police, and Coast Guard, planting the Philippine flag at Sandy Cay to uphold our sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction. Sounds familiar, mga kabansa. Sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction. Ayan na ho yung rules-based order. This law is a bad law. It only obfuscates legalism instead of birthing solutions with other claimant states. This internal law has created many ghost and choke points. Rear Admiral Trinidad is the classic example of this ghost. So with J. Tariela of the Coast Guard and Jonathan Malaya of the National Security Council. The Coast Guard, BRP Cabra, if you remember 2 to 3 weeks ago, have been patrolling the high seas 78 nautical miles away from Zambales, close to Bajo de Masinloc. What is BRP Cabra patrolling the high seas for? Nag-aaksaya sila ng crudo in an area where China's sovereignty claims an effective control. So lahat ito rehearsed, lahat ito coordinated, mga kabansa. Bakit? By April 20, pasok ang BRP, Apolinario Mabini, mismo sa loob ng territorial sea ng Scarborough Shoal. At hindi pa natatapos ang military exercises. Ito na ang Sandy Cay invasion by this interagency maritime operation. Buo na kayo. Ayusin nyo naman ang mga drawing nyo. Bakit ako nagre-reklamo dito? Anong pruweba ko? Ay, BRP Cabra, 80 nautical miles from the Scarborough Territorial Sea. Pero 78 nautical miles outside of our territorial sea. Outside of our 12 nautical miles and internal waters. Ayan, makakabansa. Kung sasabihin niya, they're within the 200 nautical miles, teka muna, yung ibabaw ng tubig ay high seas. Anong ginagawa mo dyan? At hindi kasama dyan kung baga yung territorial sea na yun around Scarborough. Ha? Malilintikan kayo dyan kay Tariela. Ano ang mga choke points? It cannot legislate for anything. The law cannot legislate for anything outside of our territorial limits. Our laws only apply to 12 nautical miles from our coastlines. Outside of that, we are fair game. But the law provided for a territorial sea around Scarborough Shoal, which is classified by UNCLOS and verified by the arbitral ruling as a RAC. So itong ginawa na Apolinario Mabini is a gross violation of the UNCLOS delimitation of maritime zones which is created in reference to land sovereignty. A law cannot create territorial sea. Even it's provided in the Philippine Maritime Zones Act, creating a territorial sea around Bajo de Masinloc. You cannot do that because territorial sea is determined as per UNCLOS and international law. It's a 12 nautical mile extension from a land-based sovereignty. It is the land-based sovereignty that establishes the 12 nautical mile territorial sea. It is not a law. It cannot be the subject of a legislation. In this regard, the land-based sovereignty over Scarborough Shoal belongs to China that is in effective control of the rock. And here is my proof in this video. My undisputed proof. Pakinggan po nyo ang aking witness. Key witness.
Right after the Scarborough Shoal standoff, we totally lost control of Bajo de Masinloc. Since 2012 until now, it passing through three presidential administration, from President Aquino, President Duterte, now President Bongbong Marcos. It is already an open book that the Chinese Coast Guard has a complete control of Bajo de Masinloc.
My star witness. No less than Commodore J. Tristan Tariel. Tignan ko ngayon kung i-dispute niya yung sarili niyang sinabi. Pangalawa, the law acknowledged Presidential Decree 1599, which provided archipelagic baselines demarcating the Calayan Island Group. Pero ito, kinodefine ng Philippine Maritime Zones Law, pero dinisqualify ng arbitral ruling as incompatible with UNCLOS. So how can you legalize something that is internationally illegal? Pangatlo, so una, Scarborough. Pangalawa, itong Calayan Island Group. Pangatlo, nag-legislate din po ang Philippine Maritime Zones Act ng Luzon Sea na hindi naman nakalista sa International Hydrographic Organization, the U.S. authority in worldwide mapping. Pang-apat, it legislated for jurisdiction over our claim for EEZ, but UNCLOS does not provide for sovereign rights, as we have mentioned earlier, on the surface of EEZ that it considers as high seas. So, nawala ang Scarborough Shoal, nawala ang Calayan Island Group, nawala ang Sulu Sea, nawala ang jurisdiction sa high seas. Anong natira sa West Philippine Sea? My friend. So, the West Philippine Sea is only a legal fact, but in reality, a figment of our imagination. Anyway, punta tayo sa gusto kong pagtibayan ngayong araw na ito more than anything else. On May 13 to 15 last year, diplomats from the DOC parties met in Thailand and agreed to maintain the stability and peace in the South China Sea, continue to fully and effectively implement the DOC, remain self-sufficient, keep the momentum of dialogue, and finalize the Code of Conduct at an early date. Bakit po? Kasi yung declaration, patikim lang yun. Wala pa pong Code of Conduct at the level of a treaty, of a convention. Eh bakit ang tagal-tagal na? Ano nangyayari dyan? Ilang years na yun? 23 years na. Kasi po, since 2002, may elepante that has been insisting to enter the room. The American role in potentially stunting the COC for the South China Sea stems from its strategic competition with China and the United States' commitment upholding a rule-based order. Mga kabansa, rule-based order is not international law. International law is the totality of unwritten customary laws and written conventions or treaties throughout history. Ang rule-based order, according to Cambridge University Press, is an alternative regime outside of the discipline of international law, which inevitably challenges and threatens international law. It may be seen as a competing order which seeks to impose the interpretation of international law that best, selective po, yun lamang, that best advances the interests of the West, particularly those of the United States, to ensure its dominance. It is the will of the U.S. and its Western allies that it applies often in contradiction of international law. It is incompatible to peaceful resolution of disputes as the West enforces RBO by force to the extent of hot war, onerous sanction as in trade wars, and blackmail reciprocities. Since 1798, ito po mga kabansa, ayan, nakapaligid. Pakinggan po natin ang video na ito. Very short lamang.
The United States has launched military interventions in the vast majority of countries on Earth. Many people know that, but they can't really visualize it. So I went through the U.S. government's own data published by the U.S. Congress that documented all of the U.S. military interventions going back to 1798, and I created a map. This map shows the U.S. military interventions
abroad that have been acknowledged officially by the Congressional Research Service. You can see that it includes almost every single country in Latin America and the Caribbean. It also includes most of the African continent and huge parts of Asia, as well as Europe, of course. Now, I want to stress this point. These are only military interventions. So this does not include the hundreds and perhaps thousands of other forms of meddling that the U.S. has engaged in pretty much every country on earth, including organizing coups, meddling in elections, stealing elections, spreading propaganda, fake news, funding opposition groups. I mean, there's so many examples of U.S. meddling in pretty much every country. These are just the military interventions that have been admitted by the U.S. government. And since 1991, we are talking about 251 U.S. military interventions abroad. This data comes from a report that was published by the U.S. Congress's investigation arm, which is called the Congressional Research Service. And on March 8th of 2022, it published a report titled Instances of Use of United States Armed Forces Abroad, 1798 to 2022. So between those years, from 1798 until today, it documented 469 U.S. military interventions. And I need to stress this point again. Half of those, more than half of those, were after 1991. The United States launched at least 251 military interventions abroad between 1991 and 2022, and then 218 military interventions abroad between 1798 and 1990. Why is that important? Because it shows that after the end of the First Cold War, when the United States claimed that it was, going to support peace and democracy and freedom and all that nonsense after the Soviet Union was overthrown, the U.S. continued and actually accelerated its foreign military interventions.
There you go. The United States is not even a member of the UN Convention on the Laws of the Sea, and yet its dirty finger can be felt everywhere in the region. But China recognizes that the seas are for the common heritage of mankind. Its willingness to share the waters and land features, however, must be reached by bilateral negotiations. Ito na po yung way out nating lahat. A Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman recently said, those who swings the pendulum to the other extreme would perish by fire. Pinariringgan na po tayo ng China. That their patience is thinning. At katulad ng ginawa nila sa Vietnam, baka po kutusan na tayo. Ano ibig ko sabihin na China is for a common heritage of mankind? The use of the sea. The renewal of the routine resupply protocol for the BRP Sierra Madre at Ayungin Shoal proves this. China's offer of 60-40 sharing of the proceeds of the oil and gas exploration at Reed Bank, with China footing all the development tab, proves this. Allowing fisher folk to do their trade within the 12 nautical miles of Scarborough Shoal Territorial Sea and elsewhere in the South China Sea, but not too close to the shoal and definitely not inside the lagoon, proves this. Maintaining our top trading partner over the US and Japan combined, despite all the animosities in the South China Sea, proves this. This policy is not even Xi Jinping alone. It started with Deng Xiaoping, who opened up to President Aquino in 1988, saying, in view of the friendly relations between our two countries, we can set aside this issue for the meantime because that won't be resolved in their lifetime, in our lifetime. The Chinese leader suggested joint development. The Philippine side has run out of narrative. After Barbie used it in the movie The 9-Dash Line burned out, it has remained consistent in shaming China under the puppet regime of the government of Marcos. Only because the common misunderstanding is that UNCLOS, while exercising no jurisdiction on delimitations pertaining to historic rights and titles, does not recognize historic rights and titles. Yun po yung misunderstanding na binibenta nila sa lahat na dahilan na in-invalidate na ng arbitral ruling, yung 9-dash line, wala na raw natirang karapatan ng China. Ang katotohanan po ay in fact buhay na buhay. Dahil sa paragraph 272 ng arbitral award, anong sabi ng arbitral award? We have nothing to say about the historic rights. China's not changed its bottom lines by an iota. It remains resolute in regulating conduct in the South China Sea. So much that outside of any agreed protocol with another claimant state, it implements its law enforcement measuredly, but with no exception. But in lieu of a right is might settlement that can be a code of conduct, or minimally in the absence of pre-agreed protocols or bilateral agreements, what presently rules is might is right enforcement by China. Wala ho silang choice. Because they are in effective control and possession of the territory. The Chinese, after 100 years of humiliation from colonial powers, are very sensitive about its red lines in the South China Sea at lalo na sa Taiwan, Mr. Trinidad. Akala mo ba nakalimutan na kita? Their sovereignty in the South China Sea is non-negotiable unless it springs out of a negotiation table and without interference from any third parties, a foreign country, particularly a hegemonic United States. I would like to end with this slide. Last slide. Last slide tayo. Jeffrey Sachs quotes Henry Kissinger. It may be dangerous to be Americans' enemy, but to be Americans' friend is fatal. Mr. Trinidad, isaksak mo ito sa iyong baga. Pwede ba? At kung hindi ka rin lang sigurado sa mga ililik mo na pinag-uusapan nyo dyan, kayo ng mga tuta ng Amerikano sa Armed Forces of the Philippines, tumahimik na lang kayo. Ang pinangangamba ko, National Security Agency, Department of National Defense, Philippine Coast Guard, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine Navy, Philippine Army, and even the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Office of the President is on record using the word rules-based order. Yan na ho ba sinusundan nyo ngayon? Even Teresita Daza is using it. Even Ricky Manalo is using it. So sino ho ang nagpapatakbo na ng gobyerno natin ngayon? Namamasyal ho President Marcos sa Roma. Ewan ko sinong puti ang pinakikinggan niyo. Maraming salamat po.
Okay, let's check with our reactors and our media audience and anybody else who want to raise some points and questions.
Thank
In
you.
the meantime, you can stand up and stretch a bit because that was quite a heavy stuff. But our intention dito, Dani, is in-depth presentations of position papers. So I think there's a lot of data. You can access the paper of Kaado today sa ating website, asiancenturyphilippines.com. AsianCenturyPH.com.
Again,
Anyway,
okay,
yeah,
thank
tingnan
you.
natin, may mga
Yeah,
tanong.
thank you, Kado, for that very in-depth presentation on what's really happening in the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea. You can check out the rest of Kado's paper and presentation on our website, asiancenturyph.com. But before we move on to Kamintong's presentation, let us get to some of the comments and reactions if we have from the audience watching us live via Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube.
Any hands raised?
Any hands raised? Please raise your hands in Zoom if you want to, if you wish to give a reaction or a comment on Kaado's presentation earlier.
There is none, we can proceed.
Yeah, we can proceed later na lang. We'll try to get some of your questions later after Kamintong's presentation. Next, of course, is Kamentong Laurel, President of Asian Century Philippines, to give his presentation.
Okay. Yes, magandang umaga po sa lahat. At alam ko baka pagod na po ang inyong mga mata at inyong mga tenga sa napakahaba pero napaka manaman na pahayag ni kasamang Ado Paglinawan. The presentation of Ka-Ado, no, is heavy with evidence and indisputable, I think. That is why he is very prepared to face the TRICOM and very prepared to crush the presentations of Tariela and company. Likewise, we have prepared a paper on the cognitive warfare of the United States of America and its proxies in the Philippines. Kasi major issues talaga ito. Ito ay tuloy-tuloy na panloloko po sa ating bayan ng mga alagad ng Estados Unidos at ng Estados Unidos mismo dito sa bayan po natin. Ito po ay nagtagal na po ng 15 taon, simula po nung taong 2011 nung naanunsyo ang pivot to Asia ni Presidente Obama at that time. So I will flash back to history para malagay po natin sa konteksto ang lahat ng ating pinag-uusapan. And sa history po natin makikita ang katotohanan dahil po yung cognitive warfare po ay nililimita ang pananaw ng mga tao doon sa short term lang at kanilang pinapalit-palit every week kung ano ang focus para hindi po makita ang kabuuan ng katotohanan. Kaya po ang ating pamagat po sa araw na to, our title is US Proxies Cognitive Warfare Meets Reality. Nasa lubong ngayon ng US Proxy na panloloko ang katotohanan. At sisimula po tayo sa counting paliwanag tungkol sa cognitive warfare. Cognition po ay yung ating pagtanggap po ng mundo. And ang cognitive warfare po ay walang katapusan po yan. May tuloy-tuloy na wrestling sa ating mga perceptions, ika nga sa English, ang ating paningin sa mga nangyayari sa mundo. Lalo na, I'll now go to the English version. No? Cognitive warfare is a never-ending process when a society is under contention by competing forces. Tulad ng Pilipinas, sa kasalukuyan, competing po ang realidad at yung gusto ng Estados Unidos at ng kanilang mga proxies at mga kasabot po dito sa lipunan po natin na may control po ng media at pera, ekonomiya, silang may control at pilit po nila hinuhubog ang pananaw ng sambayanan. Bakit po nila ginagawa yan? Dahil sila po ang nakikinabang sa kasalukuyang sistema. Mapapansin po ninyo, malino naman po, pahirap na pahirap ang taong bayan, but ang mga korporasyong dambuhala ay palaki ng palaki ang tubo. How can those two coexist? Merong natatalo, merong nanalo. No? And so our society is under contention by competing forces. The Philippines has been, since the 2011 announcement of the Obama pivot to Asia, the focus of extreme U.S. efforts to geopolitically capture, mahuli po tayo, control and direct towards its strategic goal of creating conflict and war in Asia to contain the rise of China and Asia and maintain its status as a global hegemon. Now, may unang slide po tayong naihanda. This is from our archives po. No? I think we presented this in 2017 or sometime there. Hanggang ngayon, importante po na ma-refresh po ang alaala po ng taong bayan tungkol dito. The U.S. Cognitive Warfare Strategy for the Philippines is built, nakatayo po, on the 2016 arbitration case conceived and executed by U.S. legal advisors in the government of Benigno Aquino III the last heir of the US-instituted EDSA 1 color revolution. So history pa po yan. That goes back to 1986. No? The arbitration judgment does not even have the acknowledgement of the UN up to this day. Yet the Philippine US proxies controlled mainstream media has propagated the myth of its validity as a quote-unquote landmark decision. Let's go back to that. So ayan po, nasa sentro po si Dujarric, Stefan Dujarric, spokesman noon at hanggang ngayon spokesperson pa rin po ng United Nations. No? At sabi niya, the UN does not have or doesn't have a position on the legal and procedural merits of the case or on the disputed claims. Hanggang ngayon po, 15 taon na po lumipas. Since the promulgation of the arbitration, ilang taon na, halos 9 na taon na, 2016 kasi po yon. So, let's keep that in mind, ano? Para hindi po tayo malinlang. Okay, let's go to slide number 2 and I will read the US Proxy's cognitive warfare strategy ran smack, nabangga sa realidad, ran smack against reality when geopolitically independent Filipino political leader Rodrigo R. Duterte won the presidency in 2016 as President Duterte carried out the Philippine Constitution Section 7 mandating that, quote, the state shall pursue an independent foreign policy, unquote, which led to an economic boom in trade, official development assistance, tourism, and investments from China. Ayan po ang isang slide po showing tremendous amount of investments and projects that the population is not even aware of. Have you heard of this project, Green Oil and Phytochemicals from Cashew Nuts? It's a technological process na pinasukan po ng ODA ng China. The Belt and Road of Avian Infectious Diseases. This is a clinical study, Sinophyl charm, the development of exosome probe chip, and so on and so forth. Napakarami po dyan. Aside from the next slide po, infrastructure. The next slide is, I think, mga bridges po na naitayo na po. Yan. So these are only 3 of the infrastructure projects. The Intramuros Binondo Bridge, the dito sa Makati, Estrella Pantaleon Bridge. Sa Davao po, yung anong tawag sa Davao? Bucana Bridge, if I'm not mistaken. No? Okay, so then you have, of course, the Chico River Dam Irrigation Project. You have the Chico River Dam. You have the Kaliwa Dam Project that will add 600 million liters per day na tubig para sa Metro Manila na ngayon kung tagtuyot nagkukulang na po tayo ng tubig. So lahat yan po nabubura ng malalaking media at puro China, bully China, China threat ang ating nakikita kasi po yan po ay mamaya mapapaliwanag po natin sa tulong ni Amy Marcos communications plan. So the US proxies cognitive war run smack against reality. So itong reality, pero may mas malaking reality pa po darating. Slide number 4, and then the Duterte administration with its independent foreign policy earned 81% satisfaction rating as it ended in 2022 despite the COVID-19 crisis. The satisfaction with Duterte translated to a landslide victory for the UNITEAM in 2022, the Marcos-Sara Duterte tandem in the 2022 elections, which started off successfully sustaining the independent foreign policy until February 2023, when Bongbong Marcos openly returned to the vassal status to the United States. Yan. So, matagumpay po talaga si Presidente Duterte, drug war, foreign policy, independent foreign policy. Tandaan po niyan, let's refresh our memory of those better days in the past. Slide number 5. In February of 2023, Bongbong Marcos acceded to the implementation of quote-unquote Project Muso, Again, a reminder, we keep going back to these facts, no? Presented by the U.S. Naval Institute's Captain Benjamin Golzari, U.S. Air Force, in a conference in January 2023, hosted by Strat Base, ADRI Albert de Rosario Institute proposed the assertive transparency strategy to quote-unquote impose reputational costs against Beijing. Anong reputational cost? Sisiraan ang image ng Beijing through using the Philippine Maritime Security Units, Philippine Coast Guard, Philippine Navy, to provoke Chinese reaction to sensationalize in media. Now, ako'y pinesend ko po ito because this is a report from the US Naval Institute in 2023, November. Remember, this seminar with ADRI Strat Base is January 2023. February 2023, nagsimula na po yung mga banggaan sa Ayungin Shoal between Chinese Coast Guard, Philippine Coast Guard, and so on, then Scarborough Shoal, and so on. For all these years now, since 2023, February, tuloy-tuloy po yan. But this is an official report, no? Sabi dito, Project Museum presented, that is the Americans, no? Presented its concept to a conference in early January 2023, hosted by Strat Base. Sino yung Strat Base? Sila Carpio, sila Dindo Manhit, a Manila-based business consultancy daw, but it is really geopolitical. As independent civil society-led, Project Mutual supports U.S. goals to expose and deter China's gray zone activities. No? Yan po yung sinasabing assertive transparency strategy. Through application of what Powell calls assertive transparency, MU helps counter the asymmetric advantage of China. So they admit China really has a huge advantage. And anong kanilang target, anong kanilang goal? By increasing the reputation cost China pays for those very tactics. China's willingness to pay these costs is not limitless, and continual public exposure provides the most direct. Ang assumption nila ay mapapahiya ang China, masisira ang China. But what does history demonstrate and show us? No? Let's go to slide number 5. That's slide number 5 ba? No, number 6 na po ito. No? So by the middle of 2024, in July, Raymond Powell, 2024, 2023 kaninang pinag-usapan po natin, ngayon 2024 na po. In July of 2024, halos isang taon, no? From February, or more than 1 year. In July, Raymond Powell, the originator of the assertive transparency, the creator of the strategy, had to publish an article entitled "Transparency Has Not Failed in the Philippines." Yan. So, pinagdidebatehan na po doon sa pagitan ng mga proxies nilang Pilipino at ng mga Amerikano at ibang mga Amerikanong analysts, ay palpak yung assertive transparency nyo. Talo na yan. Pero Raymond Powell, na nilagay ko doon sa inset, dididepensa po yan. Samantalang ang CNN, ABS-CBN, iba pa, tuloy-tuloy doon sa assertive transparency para scandalize ang China, and so on. But the fact is, Raymond Powell, by the middle of 2024, ay dinidepensa na po yung transparency strategy that he says did not fail, but I think it is very clear it has already failed, except that in the Philippine media scene, hindi pa po tapos kasi may pera pa rin umiikot po sa mass media po dito. So, by the middle of 2024, in July, Raymond Powell had to publish an article entitled "Transparency Has Not Failed the Philippines," as had professionally managed the Philippine provocations, calibrated the use of as China had professionally managed the Philippine provocations, calibrated the use of non-lethal means such as water cannons and blockades, gained more ASEAN and international understanding of the U.S. proxies' malicious intent. The surveys also showed that the public interest in the territorial imbroglio interested only 5 to 7% of the population. So hindi po talaga nagtagumpay yung kanilang cognitive warfare po using this. China's justification for exercising more cogent measures in asserting its control over various maritime areas disputed by the Philippines has grown stronger rather than weaker. Yung justification po nila, lalong tumibay kaysa humina due to the failure of the US and its proxies' assertive transparency strategy, while the Philippines' isolation from conflict and tensions averse, ayaw ng ASEAN conflict and tensions averse ASEAN is growing wider over the past 2 years and a half of the US-Philippine efforts to ramp up tensions in the region. The next segment is entitled FPRRD Abduction, Cognitive Warfare Plus. Kasi hindi lang po cognitive warfare po ang operation ng Amerikano dito, kundi political and geopolitical, economic, financial, whole society. Kaya po nagsimula po kanina tayo na magpaliwanag na ang cognitive warfare involves the entire society. So quote dito ulit, cognitive warfare which aims to manipulate the way a population thinks and behaves can impact the whole society by exploiting existing divisions, undermining trust, and shaping public discourse. The Google AI explains, with this we fast forward to the latest developments in the whole society cognitive warfare of the US and its proxies, or chihuahuas I call them, in the Philippines. So slide number 7. Senator Amy Marcos has exposed in her recent Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearings that the government of BBM has planned quote-unquote Operation Horus, drawn up in April 2024, aimed at bringing down the Dutertes, including last year pa po ito, 2024, April pa, including the quote-unquote how to attack section, among other actions. A communication plan, report ni Amy, to divert the public's attention from the arrest and transport of FPRRD to issues like the West Philippine Sea and alleged disinformation activities by China. So, nalagay na po ni Senator Amy Marcos sa kontekstong karapat-dapat. Itong lahat ng mga anti-China propaganda, yung mga pagkukunwari ni Tolentino na may alam siya tungkol sa maritime law, yung mga akusasyon laban kay Infinito sa isang public relations agency na korporasyon na maraming sinisilbihan naman with their public services, but sinasabi nila ay troll na kinontrata ng Chinese Embassy para mag-troll farm. Lahat po yan kasi that is all part of what Amy Marcos is saying as communications plan po. In other words, another aspect of the cognitive warfare. So ayan po si Amy Marcos, launched a communication plan to divert the public's attention from the arrest and transport of FPRRD to issues like the West Philippine Sea and alleged disinformation by China. Now, bakit ang pamagat po natin FPRRD, Abduction, Cognitive Warfare Plus? Ito po ang plus, yung geopolitical operations ng Amerikano. And one of the plus is the removal of the Duterte legacy and the removal of Sara Duterte from the political scene para hindi po maibalik po ang independent foreign policy. Hindi po pro-China policy. Yan po ang cognitive warfare ng Amerikano na pro-China daw. Yung mga independent foreign policy implementors. No? Okay. So, Operation Horus po yan. But the abduction and kidnapping of President Duterte is another part of the U.S. strategy. This is the BBM gang's plan within the bigger plan of the U.S. cognitive warfare against China. In January of 2024, BBM reiterated the ICC has no jurisdiction in the Philippines. Hence, the country, quote-unquote, won't cooperate in its investigation. Yet on March 11, 2025, Bongbong Marcos lied to the world saying that he had forced the arrest of FPRRD, quote-unquote, because the Interpol asked us to do it, unquote, which is now discredited, a discredited claim based on the dubious justification of the diffusion notice. Hindi na po tayo papasok sa mga detalyeng technical diyan sa diffusion, red notice, and so on. Before we get entangled in the minutiae of the FPRRD kidnap incident, let us take a wide-angle view again and look at the whole context of the anti-FPRRD, former President Rodrigo R. Duterte context of the anti-FPRRD and anti-VP Sara campaign. Who benefits from the elimination of FPRRD and Vice President Sara Duterte from the Philippine political scene? Sino bang talagang ultimong makikinabang? Iba-ibang mga salita tungkol dito. At one level, it is theorized that Martin Romualdez started it all with the People's Initiative in 2023 to revise the Constitution to obviate, para matanggal, the vice presidential succession system. May mga sabi doon noon, convert to parliamentary para maka-take over si Martin Romualdez as Prime Minister. Nawala na si Bibi Sara, wala nang presidential system, walang vice president na. So that was one theory, which is also valid. It doesn't mean that the other theories are invalid. So, tuloy po tayo. Another theory is it's the First Lady clearing the way for Congressman Sandro Marcos to the presidency, the way to the presidency, and others that FPRRD's kidnap is the doings, other theories, is the doings of the CPP, NDF, Hague, links, sabi nung iba, tulad ni General Panlade, at ni yung dating Nika Chief ba, I'll remember the name later, na ang mga CPP ang nagplano nitong lahat ng kidnap kay Duterte at pagdala sa Hague. While one can agree that all these political factions have intense motives to neutralize FPRD and VP Sara Duterte, but do they have the power to compel the ICC into compliance and a president of a country to self-immolate in the pyre of an ill-conceived abduction of PRRD? Pwede ba itong mga persang ito na magtulak kay BBM na mag-suicide po, political suicide, dito sa nakikita na natin? Slide number 8. But tingnan po natin, take the inner circle that conspired in the abduction of Duterte. 2 out of 4 are widely known to act as enforcers of the U.S. military in the Philippines. Defense Secretary Gibo Teodoro and National Security Advisor Secretary Anyo. Ano ba ang papel nitong dalawang military side ng Pilipinas? Samantalang the operation against Duterte was a police action and Department of Justice action. This must be raised by Amy Marcos sa kanyang hearing po sa susunod. Si Anyo at si Gibo, bakit ang military na involved? Yun lang na magamit ang Nichols yung airbase, no? Villamor Air Base. That's not sufficient reason. Okay. The latter, si Anyo, defending his role in the FPRRD abduction, saying, quote-unquote, "My loyalty is always to the country," unquote. The question is, what country is his loyalty to? For the US, is the greatest beneficiary of the abduction of FPRRD. Kasi po ang buong strategiya po sa mundo ng Estados Unidos ay nakasalalay ngayon sa kanilang strategy ng proxy war sa Asia. Matapos ng proxy war sa Europa na napilay po ang Europa. Matapos po ang war sa Afghanistan, and so on and so on. It is a continuous history which Kaado has explained po since the past era of the US, where over 400 interventions in different countries have transpired with the Americans. So, over and above the local players in the Get the Dutertes game are powerful international NGOs like the USAID-funded Amnesty International, tagged as an imperialist tool. Mamaya, ito na po pala ang post, no? By Francis Boyle, based upon my 16 years of experience having dealt with Amnesty International London and Amnesty International USA at the highest levels, it is clear to me that both organizations manifest a consistent pattern and practice of following the lines of foreign policies of the United States, Britain, and Israel, and so on and so forth. Kaya ba ng CPP and NDF to manipulate Amnesty International? Kaya ba ni Lisa Satanas, ni Martin? No, it's the Americans, the funding agencies of the Americans that can compel the AI, Amnesty International, to say the following. Ang sabi ng Amnesty International, prejudging the FPRRD's case at The Hague, ang tawag po ng Amnesty International, a monumental step for justice. Even before the ICC hearing started. So, pinipredjudge po ng AI. What forces compel these disparate forces to converge against FPRRD to bring him to a court known among the global majority as the International Colonial Court? The culprit in the FPRRD abduction that no one wants to shout out loud is, quote-unquote, the US deep state, which actually is pan-Western deep state, meaning kasamang Europa po. The Duterte abduction is part of the much, much wider anti-Asia strategy of the West operating separately from the presidency of the United States. The elimination of the Dutertes, given new emphasis by IME's report, that Sara is given new emphasis by Senator Imey's report that Sara has been moved up in the ICC list for arrest. This is a key strategy, which is a key to the strategy of the United States to for total control of the Philippines. So from AI, let's move on. The FPRRD kidnapping plot has run smack head-on against the awakening Filipino nation. Nakita natin talagang nabuhay po ang bayan, ang bansa sa loob ng Pilipinas at sa labas po among the OFWs na nagbago po ang takbo ng senatorial elections at nangunguna na po ang maraming kandidato ng Duterte. The FPRRD has run smack head-on against the awakening Filipino nation and global community. At least 86% of the Filipino people in the country and abroad are up in arms against the BBM government for perpetrating the FPRRD abduction and tying up its tongues in the hearings at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. This astounding upshot from this is the surge of support for the Duterte. The Duterte senatorial candidates crucial in stopping the impeachment of Vice President Sara in the next Senate. Okay, enter the European Union election observers to monitor daw po foreign meddling. Hindi ba laughable? European Union election observers will monitor foreign meddling. Hindi ba sila foreign meddlers na? Nandiyan na. Ayan po sila. At meron pang mas malaking photo pa. Halos 30 ata sila, 4 na po. Ang dami po pala nila, hindi lang po yung 3. The headline posted by One News and Philippine Star, both Manny Pangilinan-owned, online news on April 28, 2025, was both ominous and laughable. Ang headline po niya ay, quote-unquote, EU poll observers to monitor trolls, foreign meddling, unquote. Right at the same week, the BBM government functionaries such as National Security Gopher Jonathan Malaya is out in the media spreading baseless scare of quote-unquote indications of China, quote-unquote, interfering with upcoming 2025 midterm elections. Now, let us remember, Amy already exposed this, that this is part of the communications plan to blame a lot of things on China para ma-distract dun sa FPRRD kidnapping case na hindi naman po nagtatagumpay po yung distraction. It is ominous, slide number 12. It is ominous as it signals itong pagpasok po ng European Union. Direct intervention of the Western powers in the May 11, 2024 midterm elections in support of the cognitive warfare of the BBM government that it is waging to cloud up the predictable cheating it will be committing to overcome the mounting surge of Duterte pro-independence candidates against BBM's pro-US candidates. The vulnerability of the voting machine to cheating is already exposed by Isabela mayoral candidate, Attorney Jerry Respicio, as well as Attorney Glenn Chong's latest exposés. The timing and coordination of arrival, media appearance, and converging messaging of the EU election observer mission with BBM's black election propaganda is very striking. The win of the US-backed and sycophantic BBM senatorial candidates is strategically crucial for the plans of the United States proxy war to cripple Asia's economic rise that Trump 2.0 tariff war has failed to dampen. So yan po yung nagbabanggaan si Attorney Respicio laban sa COMELEC chair na si Garcia na dating election lawyer po ni Bongbong Marcos. So let's move on to slide 13. These EU election observer missions are laughable as Europe's conduct of elections are themselves in serious question today, with cases of electoral manipulation and sabotage by pro-EU and pro-war, anti-Russia governments or by opposing factions in and out of government. In the 2024 elections in Georgia and Romania, they were highlighted by pro-West versus anti-West political forces, where the governments in power annulled victories of anti-West candidates, charging Russian influence operations or cheating. The US geopolitical interference abounded. Western Europe is no exception. Sarah Wagenknecht was robbed of her 5% win for parliament by failure of many of the 230,000 registered voters abroad failing to receive their ballots, ensuring the victory of the pro-war Friedrich Merz sa Germany po yan. In France, the EU power elite engineered the imprisonment of top opposition leader Marine Le Pen, and barring the leading candidate to run in the 2027 elections to preserve the rule of the prevailing ruling powers led by Emmanuel Macron, a move heavily criticized by EU leaders like Hungary's Viktor Orban and US Vice President J.D. Vance. So sila mismo nagkakagulo sa Europa, sila pa ang magbabantay ng eleksyon dito sa Pilipinas. Yan po, from the Euronews, ang mga, just one of the thousands of news about the chaos in European elections in this era of conflict between the West and Russia in the European region. Okay, the next slide. Ang sagot po ng Chinese Embassy dito sa interference daw with the elections, sabi po ng Chinese Embassy in Manila, election interference, a heinous accusation according to the Chinese Embassy. But this is what I wrote. China has zero record of interference in internal politics of any nation. The US has a long history of interference in nations all over the world. In the Philippines, the US installed President Quezon, of course, during the Commonwealth colonial period, President Roas after World War II, deposed Quirino, who championed the industrialization of the Philippines and helped Magsaysay win. Everybody remembers Edward Lansdale na siyang campaign manipulator behind Ramon Magsaysay. The Americans deposed Garcia to install Diosdado Macapagal, and one of the main means was the $200,000 donation, which is a huge amount in 1951, if I'm not mistaken, 1954, donation of the American Manufacturers Association to Diosdado Macapagal's campaign fund, which helped defeat President Garcia, the champion of the Filipino First policy. So ito ang record po dito sa Pilipinas. And of course, the Americans, in collaboration with the Catholic hierarchy, si Cardinal Sin at that time, the Philippine oligarchy, helped depose Marcos Sr. in 1986 and installed the Yellow regime from 1986 to 2016 ni Cory Aquino down to Noynoy Aquino, briefly interrupted in 1999 by Estrada, whom the US also deposed with the help of the late General Angelo Reyes in a suicide. President Duterte disrupted that flow of American control of elections in 2016, only for the US to return in 2023 with BBM's pivot back to the United States. To have foreign election observers from the EU to monitor foreign meddling is truly ironical and oxymoronic. It also portends more controversy and chaos in the coming midterm elections. In the end, it may take a Duterte people power action in nationwide scattered mass protests and civil disobedience campaign to paralyze the US-BBM regime and force it to abdicate, along with the removal of the US bases, missiles, to save the nation from the cataclysmic proxy war the US is plotting. And the final chapter po dito sa ating presentation, Google Maps, West Philippine Sea, on, off, and on again. Slide number 15. Last April 21, just a few days ago, this is May 2, the Philippine News Agency headline, Government welcomes inclusion of the West Philippine Sea in Google Maps. Celebratory. Tons of social media government trolls hailed this. But on April 30, just 9 days later, 2025, the ABS-CBN News headline, quote-unquote, West Philippine Sea no longer visible on Google Maps. Then on May 1, a few days later, GMA News Online headlines again, quote-unquote, West Philippine Sea labeled back on Google Maps, unquote. This is how whimsical the claim of the West Philippine Sea is as a basis for waging a war of tension with China. Lokohan lang po talaga yung West Philippine Sea. It is just a handle, a tool for the communications plan, for the cognitive warfare. Aminin na po natin, matuto na po tayo tungkol dito. For this whimsical claim, the Philippines has been sacrificing its ties with the roaring economic giant of the world, China. In the process, losing yearly billions of dollars of income from Chinese tourism, infrastructure projects, official development assistance, and investments that all other ASEAN countries are enjoying with China's growing economy, even amidst the now failing US tariff war 2.0, while special ties with the US means loaning to buy warplanes and missiles. Slide 16 and 16.1. China is leading the global majority towards a brave new multipolar world, while the Philippines willingly stays behind its traditional colonial master to languish with the US and its allies' failing economies. By the way, first quarter, January to March, economic growth of the US has officially been announced. It's 0.3%. Negative po. Samantalang first quarter ng China is 5.3% positive growth. Ito po from one of the top billionaires of America, Jamie Dimon. Donald Trump is losing his war with the world in the tariff war after barely a week. This was as far back as April 9 pa po. Ito, we're now May 2nd. Ano? And so tayo naglalanguish with America, unable to even take advantage of the lower 17% tariff of the US that BBM's DBM Secretary Pangandaman says will weigh negatively on net exports, consumption, employment, and fiscal balance. Ito po si DBM Secretary of Budget and Management pala, hindi Secretary. Amena F. Pangandaman. At sabi niya, walang pakinabang ang Pilipinas dun sa mas mababa daw ang taripang 17%. We expect the new policy to weigh negatively on net exports as a direct effect, and on consumption, employment, and fiscal balance as a second round effect. So, di lang po isa, kundi napakaraming secondary effects. As an exporting country to the US, the additional tariffs may result in lowering of prices of exported goods. So bababa pa lalo ang presyo ng in-export natin to the US to make them more competitive when compared to other countries exporting the same. And I have been stressing again, yung internal factors po natin, yung taas ng presyo ng kuryente natin, yung lack of infrastructure, yung lack of skilled workers po, lahat po yan weighs heavily on our economy to be able to take advantage of any favors from America. And America is not giving us really any favors. So let's move on to slide 14. 4 consecutive months of increasing poverty ratings is reported by SWS in April of 2025. Yung poverty po natin talagang tuloy-tuloy na tumataas at bumibilis po. Monthly na po ang pag-decline, ang pagtaas po ng poverty rate, monthly na. And amid continuing agitation from the country's security establishment, that is the NSA, on alleged China election interference and Philippine Navy flirtation with Taiwan naval cooperation, a clear red line of China and the anti-China propaganda. The Philippine government has been warned by the Chinese government that it is playing with fire. Anyway, ito po ang post nagagaling sa publiko po natin. Why should the Philippines pay America $280 million per F-16 old model when Taiwan is getting latest model for $122 million? Samantalang sa baba po ay larawan po ng mga mahirap na mga bata. Yan. Okay, we'll move on. So, 4 consecutive months for including increasing poverty, and China has warned that the Philippine government is playing with fire. It is time the Philippines end Project Museo, yung assertive transparency. Tigilan ninyo, Tariela. Bigo na po yan. Tapos na po yan. Restore the exercise of independent foreign policy. Eject the US and its military bases and missiles from the country and rejoin the ASEAN's active pursuit of economic progress and prosperity, adhering to ZOPFAM, Zone of Peace, Freedom, and Neutrality, and the SEANFZ, or the Southeast Asian Nuclear Free Zone Treaty. If not, we call for and push for impeachment of BBM, and this must now proceed, and civil disobedience if that is not sufficient. Yan po ang ating presentation. Maraming salamat po. Danny, back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Kamentong, for that very enlightening.
Yeah. This is the last slide po natin. Chinese Foreign Minister warns Manila not to play with fire on the Taiwan question. And may spokesman po sila na gumamit po na those who play with fire shall perish. Now, maraming kahulugan po ang binigay ng international media po doon sa salitang perish. Hindi po biro ang mga bawat salita kataga na ginagamit ng Chinese Foreign Ministry. Kaya po ito ay malaman at may laman na warning po. Now, I would wish to add, China will never threaten the Filipino people. But it is the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Navy that will be wiped out. Unfortunately, dun sa areas na may US military bases, hindi po maiwasan na tatamaan po ang civilian population. Kaya this year po, ang Asian Century Philippines will be extending its campaign to the centers or the provinces where US bases are stationed, and we will be holding rallies doon sa bawat probinsyang iyon. With that, Danny, back to you.
Thank you, Kamentong, for that very enlightening and in-depth presentation on the situation between Philippine-China relations as it relates to the South China Sea or West Philippine Sea territorial and maritime dispute. Now, let's get to some questions because we're now at 11:30. Let's try to get to some questions. Please send them to them on Facebook, YouTube, and then Zoom. We'll try to get to many of them as we can.
So mga comments po from our YouTube viewers, And we welcome Joy Cruz here among the people who are identified dito sa ating lineup. And sabi po ni Lingayen, there you go, that is Trump's first 3 months in office, yung 0.3% decline in US GDP. Not good at all. He is, by the way, a proud graduate of Wharton School of Economic Idiocracy. Okay. So, walang questions, maraming comment. Let's scroll up. Ano, may si Joe Cruz ba? Merong ano? Hindi, may nagbanggit pala kay Joy Cruz. Ano? Okay. Sabi ni Agustin Makalintal, salamat sa inyo, Kaado, Kamentong, sa walang sawang pagtuturo sa mamayan ng bansa, sa mga tunay na nangyayari sa at gustong palitawin ng mga politikong walang kabusugan at katakawan at nais manatili. What about our reactors, Edmund Pancha, kung may tanong or he wants to comment? Doon po sa ating Zoom room naman po si Edmund Pancha. I think he left the room already. I'm glad your colleagues are still hanging on.
I don't think so.
Wala
I don't
pa?
think so. I don't think so.
Kala ko sila Mia. And
No, I'm not sure.
Okay, anyway. So, if there are no questions and other comments that we can read, basta na lang tayo ng comments. The arbitral court in 2016, so-called award, declared Pag-asa a wrap. Ang arbitration court ay bumases lang sa UNCLOS na binigyan din ng EEZ ng mga bansa na nasa harap ng dagat. Okay. Anything else here? Trinidad needs to be reminded what happened to South Vietnam and Afghanistan. US fled in haste and their tail tucked in shame, and the destruction of South Vietnam. 4 million killed in Vietnam. Afghanistan, uncounted numbers. And yun ang mangyayari po sa Pilipinas pag dumating po yung proxy war po na yan, which we are trying to prevent. Okay, I think that's about it, Tani.
Okay, that's about it. Thank you. So we can.
Yeah, I think we can close now.
Okay. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us in this symposium forum. Thank you to all of our viewers in Facebook, YouTube, and Zoom watching us in live stream and in the replay. Thank you to Kamentong, Kado, myself, of course, and also to everyone joining us, who joined us in the Zoom, giving their reactions. My colleagues in my kasamahan sa China in the past recent China trip. Thank you for sharing your experiences. And God bless and have a great day.
Okay.